Put an episode of Friends next to an episode of The Bear. Just look at them, with the sound off. One looks like a stage play someone happened to film. Bright, flat, evenly lit, 3 walls and a couch. Everyone's face lit up like it's the middle of the afternoon indoors. The other looks like a movie. Shadows fall across faces. The camera creeps around a kitchen like it's stalking someone. There's a shot lingering on a knife hitting a cutting board for a beat longer than it needs to. Both of those shows are technically comedies. And they don't just tell jokes differently. They physically look like they were made by 2 entirely different industries, decades apart, on completely different budgets. Except they weren't. One of them premiered in 2022. So what actually happened? Why did the visual language of the sitcom, a format that stayed almost frozen for 50 years, suddenly fracture into a dozen different looks in the span of about 2 decades? And here's the part that might surprise you. The reason your favorite modern comedy looks like a film isn't really about better cameras. It's about an entire industry quietly admitting that the old way of shooting comedy was never really about comedy at all. It was about theater. By the end of this video, you'll never watch a sitcom the same way again, because you'll be able to spot exactly which era, which budget, and which philosophy built the picture on your screen. Let's rewind to the format that built the entire visual grammar of the American sitcom in the first place. When Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz built I Love Lucy in the early 1950s, they didn't just create a hit show. They engineered an entire production system, one designed to solve a very specific problem. Ball wanted to perform in front of a real, live studio audience, the way she would on stage. But television at the time typically filmed shows with a single camera, one angle at a time, which meant actors had to repeat the same scene over and over from different positions. Audiences don't laugh the same way twice. A joke that kills the first time often falls flat on the 5th take. So the show's cinematographer, Carl Freund, who had actually shot classic Hollywood films before moving to television, helped design a solution: multiple cameras, running simultaneously, capturing wide shots and close-ups all at once, in front of one continuous live performance. That way, the audience only had to react once, for real, and the editors could cut between angles afterward to build the scene. This setup is the reason multi-camera sitcoms look the way they do, even 70 years later. Because several cameras are shooting the same space at the same time, from different angles, the lighting has to work for all of them simultaneously. You can't light dramatically from one specific direction, because that same light might blow out a completely different camera's shot 10 feet away. The solution is to flood the entire set with bright, even, shadowless light. The same technique used in stage plays, so an audience seated anywhere in a theater can see every actor's face clearly. That's why classic multi-camera sitcoms, from I Love Lucy to Cheers to Seinfeld to The Big Bang Theory, all share that same flat, bright, almost shadowless look. It isn't a stylistic choice so much as a physical requirement of the format. You're not really watching television. You're watching a filmed stage play, built around a proscenium, 3 walls and an open side where the cameras and audience sit. That format also shapes the writing itself. Because the show is performed live, in real time, in front of people, jokes are built for immediate audience reaction. Punchlines have to land clean, and pacing is fast, theatrical, presentational. Actors often perform slightly bigger than they would for a film camera, because they're playing to a room, not just a lens. For decades, this was simply what a sitcom was. It's genuinely strange to think about now, but until surprisingly recently, filming a comedy any other way, without an audience, without that flat lighting, without that proscenium setup, was the exception, not the rule. So what broke it? Money, at first. Oddly enough, money working in the opposite direction than you'd expect. Shooting single camera. The way films are shot, with one camera repositioned for every single shot, used to be significantly more expensive and time-consuming than the multi-camera studio setup. You need more setups, more lighting changes, more days of shooting for the same amount of finished footage. For most of television history, single camera shows were the rare, prestige exception, reserved mostly for dramas. But video technology kept improving, and eventually digital cameras became good enough and cheap enough that shooting single camera stopped being an enormous financial gamble. Around the same time, a new creative appetite emerged. Writers wanted to build worlds that felt less like a stage and more like real, lived-in spaces. They wanted characters who could walk into a hallway, drive a car, wander into a completely different location entirely, none of which is remotely practical inside a single soundstage built for a live studio audience. Malcolm in the Middle, in the year 2000, became one of the shows that proved this new approach could be a massive commercial hit rather than just an artsy experiment. Shot entirely single camera without any studio audience or laugh track, it looked completely different from anything else on network television at the time. The camera moved. It found strange angles. It lingered on reactions in ways a multi-camera set physically couldn't allow, because now, lighting could be built scene by scene, shot by shot, exactly the way a feature film handles it, since there was no audience or second camera to accommodate. And then came the format that pushed the visual transformation even further, the mockumentary. When the American version of The Office premiered, its entire visual identity was built around one core illusion that an actual documentary crew was filming real events in a real office. That meant handheld cameras, slightly imperfect framing, zooms that occasionally hunted to find focus, exactly the way a real documentary crew's camera operator might adjust in the moment. Characters occasionally glanced directly into the lens, aware of being filmed, something that would have been an enormous rule break in a traditional sitcom, where the fourth wall is sacred. Parks and Recreation followed the same visual playbook. So did Modern Family, using the same handheld faux documentary camera language, even though it wasn't quite as strict about the format's rules. Suddenly, sitcoms didn't just sound different without the laugh track. They looked different too, deliberately imperfect, deliberately less polished, because that roughness was the entire visual joke. A pristine, cinematic version of The Office would have completely destroyed its premise. Here's a detail that a lot of viewers never consciously notice, but instantly recognize once it's pointed out. Multi-camera sitcoms are almost always framed wide, because the cameras need room to see an entire room and multiple actors performing at once for a live audience. Single-camera sitcoms can push in tight, isolate a single face, hold on a reaction a beat longer than the joke technically requires, because there's no live crowd's timing to accommodate. That single visual choice, how close the camera gets to a face, and how long it's willing to sit there in silence, ends up defining the entire emotional register of a show. Arrested Development pushed this even further than most people realize. The show used a fast, almost frantic single-camera style, paired with an omniscient narrator, rapid zooms, and quick cutaway gags that resembled something closer to a nature documentary parody than a traditional sitcom. That visual chaos wasn't incidental. It mirrored the chaotic, unreliable world of the Bluth family itself, proving that camera style wasn't just decoration. It could actually become part of the joke, an idea that would have been almost impossible to execute inside a static, wide, 3-camera studio setup built for a live audience's timing. Then there's color itself, something almost nobody talks about but everybody unconsciously reacts to. Classic multi-camera sitcoms tend to sit in a bright, saturated, almost candy-colored palette, warm skin tones, punchy primary colors on furniture and wardrobe, because the format's flat lighting naturally produces that look, and because bright, cheerful color reinforces the reassuring low-stakes tone the genre was built on. Modern single-camera prestige comedy, by contrast, frequently reaches for the same desaturated, moodier color grading used in prestige dramas, muted greens, cooler shadows, a visual palette that quietly tells your brain, this story might hurt a little, before it makes you laugh. You can often guess whether a show is going to be a pure comfort watch or something more emotionally complicated within the first 10 seconds, purely from how saturated the picture looks before a single character has said a word. Then, streaming arrived, and the transformation accelerated into something almost unrecognizable compared to where it started. Streaming platforms didn't need to fill a 22-episode broadcast season built around predictable weekly time slots. Suddenly, a comedy could run for 8 or 10 episodes a year instead of 22, which meant significantly more money and time could be spent crafting each individual episode. Shows stopped needing to look cheap and fast. They could afford to look expensive and deliberate. This is where comedy started borrowing directly from cinema, not just in technique, but in personnel. Shows like Ted Lasso hired cinematographers and production designers with backgrounds specifically built around avoiding the typical flatly lit sitcom look, crafting scenes with deliberate shadow, texture, and depth, the same visual toolkit used in feature films. The Bear went even further, hiring a cinematographer who had spent years shooting restaurant commercials, bringing an almost sensory, tactile visual style to its kitchen scenes, extreme close-ups on food, frantic handheld camera work during chaotic rush scenes, Entire sequences that feel more like a thriller than a comedy. It's the kind of visual craftsmanship that would have been almost unthinkable and definitely unaffordable for a network sitcom operating on a weekly broadcast schedule just 20 years earlier. And this is really the moment where the word sitcom itself started to strain under the pressure. Shows like The Bear, Atlanta, and Fleabag technically get filed under comedy at award shows, and yet visually, tonally, sometimes even emotionally, they resemble prestige dramas far more than they resemble anything Lucille Ball would have recognized as a situation comedy. Critics started reaching for a different word entirely: dramedy. A genre defined less by camera setup and more by tone, blending real heartbreak with real jokes, often within the exact same scene. Meanwhile, something else was quietly happening behind the scenes that most viewers never think about. The screen itself changed shape. Older sitcoms were framed for boxy, almost square televisions, a ratio of 4 units wide for every 3 units tall. As widescreen high-definition displays became the standard household norm through the 2000s, shows had to adapt their compositions to a much wider frame, roughly 16 units wide for every 9 tall, changing how directors blocked scenes and where actors could physically stand in relation to each other. A show designed for an old square television, viewed today stretched or cropped onto a modern widescreen display, often looks strangely cramped or oddly composed, a visible fossil record of exactly when it was made. Watch closely, and you can often date an old rerun almost to the year, just from how much empty space sits on either side of the actor's shoulders. There's also a much less glamorous reason multi-camera shows kept surviving alongside their cinematic cousins: speed. A multi-camera sitcom can often shoot an entire episode in front of its studio audience in a single night, then move straight into rehearsing next week's script. A single-camera prestige comedy, by contrast, might spend several days shooting just one episode, carefully lighting each individual setup like a miniature film. That difference in pace is exactly why multi-camera revivals and legacy-style reboots keep resurfacing even now. Because for a studio trying to produce a large volume of episodes on a tight budget and schedule, the format that Lucille Ball engineered 70 years ago is still, in purely practical terms, remarkably efficient. So does that mean the old multi-camera, flatly lit, live audience format is simply dead, replaced entirely by cinematic single-camera prestige comedy? Not quite. And this is where the story gets genuinely surprising. Multi-camera sitcoms never actually disappeared. They persist, sometimes controversially, sometimes to significant commercial success, because the format still offers something single-camera shows structurally can't easily replicate: the electric, unpredictable energy of a live performance happening in real time in front of real people. There's a reason revivals and spin-offs occasionally choose to bring the format back rather than modernizing it away entirely. For certain kinds of jokes, broad, presentational, theatrical jokes built for a room's immediate reaction, that flat, brightly lit multi-camera stage still does something a moody, cinematic single-camera drama comedy simply isn't built to do. Which means the difference between How Friends looks and How the Bear looks was never really about which show has better technology, or which is more sophisticated. It's about which room the comedy was actually built for. One was engineered for a live audience sitting in a studio, laughing together in real time. The other was engineered for a single viewer, alone, watching a screen, expecting the same visual craftsmanship as a 2-hour film. Same word, sitcom, describing two completely different visual philosophies, built decades apart, for two completely different ways of watching. So the next time you flip between an old rerun and a brand new streaming comedy, and something about the picture itself feels instantly, almost physically different before a single joke is even told, you're not imagining it. You're seeing the fingerprint of an entire industry rebuilding itself around a simple, quietly enormous shift. Comedy used to be something you performed for a room. Now, more often than not, it's something filmed as if no room and no audience was ever there at all. Audience was ever there at all. Audience